This. Donald Trump, in his speech last night, he revealed he's got a bombshell coming next week on Hillary's dealings with her foundation. Roll that tape, please.
Hillary Clinton turned the State Department into her private hedge fund. The Russians, the Saudis, the Chinese all gave money to Bill and Hillary and got favorable treatment in return. It's a sad day in America when foreign governments with deep pockets have more influence in our own country than our great citizens.
All right, Judge, that's a straightforward statement of conflict of interest involving the Clinton Foundation, and you say what?
Most people have probably forgotten that there are two criminal FBI investigations of Mrs. Clinton. The secret server in her house, the email scandal, which we talk about all the time because it involves the failure to protect, the alleged failure to protect national security secrets, and the one Donald Trump mentioned, which is actually a team of FBI agents looking at allegations of public corruption. If I may amplify what Donald Trump said, and I would refine it slightly, I wouldn't call it a hedge fund, I'd call it a slush fund, which obviously is worse. The allegations are that she exercised the sovereign power of the Secretary of State given to her under the statutes so as to benefit her and her husband's pocketbook by doing favors for foreign governments and foreign countries and then receiving from those persons and countries substantial, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in contributions to the Clinton Foundation / slush fund.
Now, that's not necessarily illegal, but it is highly political, isn't it? That's the point.
It is illegal if her decisions as Secretary of State were influenced by her knowledge or the high probability of her knowledge that the contribution would be coming.
Is that what the FBI is looking at?
Yes, that's exactly what the FBI is looking at. Look, there are some extreme, I'll give you the most extreme example, involves her husband's friend, Frank Giustra, Giustra, a Canadian, who asked Mrs. Clinton as a foreigner for permission to own shares in a uranium mine in Utah. Secretary of State has the permission. She granted the permission. He sold 80% of his shares to Vladimir Putin. The Russians now own this uranium mine in Utah. He then gave $145 million from the proceeds to the Clinton Foundation. Now, you're raising your eyebrows. Anybody's eyebrows would be raised listening to this. Admittedly, I've given you one of the more extreme examples of this. There are many others. This is really perhaps the most incendiary of them.
It's $145 million goes into the Clinton Global Initiative or the Clinton Fund, whichever the correct name is.
Correct.
And part of that money came out of the proceeds of the sale of a uranium mine in America to Vladimir Putin.
Right. Now, again, not to Putin himself, but to a sovereign entity owned by the Russian government. Absolutely.
Well, it's all the same thing,
In that case, it is, yes. So how can she possibly explain that or justify that kind of judgment? So Trump's argument is this is the mentality that is that is putting herself out for the White House. Do you want this same corrupt mentality as president that we had as Secretary of State?
And that is a totally separate line of investigation and charges from anything to do with email.
A different team of assistant U.S. attorneys and a different team of FBI agents. Because the FBI, like any major organization, is divided by specialty. So they have a team that investigates public corruption, corruption of public officials. They have a team that investigates breaches of national security.
Now,
just two teams investigating her.
Would this team that's looking at the foundation have access to emails and other written records of the transaction with Mr. Giustra?
Yes.
They would?
Yes, absolutely.
They've subpoenaed this? They've demanded it?
I do not know if they have subpoenaed it. In order to subpoena it, a grand jury must be summoned. Now, if a grand jury is sitting and issuing subpoenas, they have kept it so quiet that we haven't heard a peep about it, which is unusual that we wouldn't have heard about it.
And Hillary Clinton trying to get out of answering questions about her use of a private email server again. Oh, yes, and she wants to avoid anything to do with the deadly 2012 attack in Benghazi. Attorneys for Clinton and her former chief of staff, Cheryl Mills, asking an appellate court to overturn a judge's order granting Judicial Watch's request for their depositions. Let's find out what's really going on. Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, great to have you with us. And your thoughts about are you really not going to be able to question Hillary Clinton after all of this?
Well, I hope not. If it were any other litigant, they'd be pushed out of court pretty darn quickly. She filed what is known as a writ of mandamus, which is, according to the Justice Department, an extraordinary remedy that should only be used in exceptional circumstances of peculiar emergency or public importance. And obviously, that doesn't cover Mrs. Clinton having to go under oath about her email misconduct. She says she has an indisputable right not to be questioned under oath. And we've laid out the many issues that are outstanding that the court also wants answered. She's not above the law, and we hope the appellate court quickly dismisses it.
Well, I want to take up, if we can, Judge Royce Lambert's order in quoting him. There is still more to learn, he said, after saying that this is one of the gravest modern offenses to government transparency. He said, even though many important questions remain unanswered, the Justice Department inexplicably still takes the position the court should close discovery and rule on dispositive motions. The court is especially troubled by this. I'm glad to hear that there is at least a judge somewhere in the judiciary that is troubled by what has transpired here, aren't you?
I am, and you'll notice he's criticizing this Justice Department and this State Department for their cover-up. And Mrs. Clinton in her filings highlights the efforts to cover up and stop discovery by the Justice Department and State Department to justify their seeking protection from having to answer questions. It's not only Mrs. Clinton, but it's her top aide, Ms. Mills, who is responsible for helping destroy half her emails. The problem here is that we've seen the Justice Department and State Department coordinating with Mrs. Clinton and her team on these issues. So not much difference between this Justice Department and the last Justice Department, certainly on the Hillary Clinton email cover-up.
Well, those are strong words, and knowing you, I know you mean every one of them. It's a shame, whether it's General Flynn, why this Attorney General wouldn't simply have this case dropped, rather than waiting for the president. Perhaps he feels he needs the political cover. Which suggests to us...
The president should quickly pardon General Flynn.
That's what he said he's thinking about doing.
He should, George H.W. Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger after he was indicted because it was clearly an abuse by that independent counsel at the time. And this attack on Flynn, this prosecution of Flynn, goes to the heart of the president's foreign powers, his power as commander-in-chief and exercising and conducting foreign policy. And by attacking Flynn over his communications with the Russians during his time as national security advisor and during the period he was representing the president-elect, attacks the ability of the president to conduct foreign policy. He should do this to protect the presidency and secure justice.
Couldn't agree with you more, Tom Fitton. And by the way, it seems we agree more often than not, doesn't it? Thank you very much, Tom. Good to have you with us.
And just for the record, we don't hate you. I don't hate you.
Okay.
Pass that along. But,
ask Jeff Zucker how he got his job.
Well, if I may follow up on some of the questions that have taken place so far here, sir.
Well, not too much. You do have other people. You do have other people, and your ratings aren't as good as some of the other people that are waiting.
Pretty good right now, actually.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
If I may ask, sir, you said earlier that WikiLeaks was revealing information about the Hillary Clinton campaign during the election cycle. You welcomed that at one.
I was okay with it.
You said you loved WikiLeaks. At another campaign press conference, you called on the Russians to find the missing 30,000 emails. I'm wondering, sir, if you...
Well, she was actually missing 33, and then that got extended with a whole pile after that. No, but I did say 30, but it was actually higher than that.
If I may ask you, sir, it sounds as though you do not have much credibility here when it comes to leaking, if that is something that you encouraged during the campaign.
Fair question. Ready?
If I may ask you that.
No, but let me do one at a time. Do you mind?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, in one case, you're talking about highly classified information. In the other case, you're talking about John Podesta saying bad things about the boss. I will say this. If John Podesta said that about me and he was working for me, I would have fired him so fast your head would have spun. He said terrible things about her. But it wasn't classified information. But in one case, you're talking about classified. Regardless, if you look at the RNC, we had a very strong, at my suggestion, and I give Reince great credit for this, at my suggestion, because I know something about this world, I said I want a very strong defensive mechanism. I don't want to be hacked.